Welcome back to Taiwan Outlook. Our guest today is Mr. Guo Chonglun. He's the Deputy Editor-in-Chief of China Times. Chonglun will be talking about the relationship between the government and the media in general. But as we know that you're also responsible for the international news section at China Times. How difficult it is to run our international news in a newspaper in Taiwan?
International news is not been the main section of the newspaper. The main section is still political, economics news.
Domestic ones.
Domestic one. But we find that people are getting more and more interest in international news. I mean, if you want to know why the exchange rate suddenly changed, this have to do with what happened in their countries. So starting from last year's, China Times had increased the international page to 2 pages. We find the response is very positive. This is not a single event because we are seeing overall the international readers, international news reader had increased. Before that, the people care about international news, interest in international news. Always they have the capability, they can read international news themselves.
That's right.
They can read the English newspaper, they can catch on CNN and so on and so forth. But starting from, I think, when Apple Daily first started, they have 4 or 5 pages of international news.
That's right.
Of course, they did the news in their own formula, meaning that they have big pictures. They are putting, for instance, the scandal of celebrities, the natural disasters, those kind of things. But we find at that time that the readership had picking up very fast. And
well, there's a market over there.
There's a market. And I would say that another new trend that has been exemplified by 中天文件世界周报, right? This had been televisionized a way of presenting the world, and that had been picking up its rating. So our newspaper find that maybe we can try that. So far, it's about 8 months, and it's been quite successful. The response is very
So
very
the
high.
readership is expanding?
The readership, especially when we do the polling, they find that international news is the most obvious features in this new layout that we are having. Right?
I think you are right that there's increasing demand for international news. But the other problem is that these people can easily click the Google and internet to find the news they want.
Right.
So what's your niche?
I think one is that we still keep our foreign correspondents. Now we have the most among the newspapers. We have 7 or 8 across the nation. London, Washington, D.C., New York, Tokyo, Bangkok. I think by their own writing, their understanding of their countries and surrounding countries, you have providing more insight than coming out from the wire service. The other thing is we try to write international news more interesting. This, with the help of internet, we can read the newspaper directly of their local countries. So we are coming out with a more interesting writing, more interesting pictures than before.
What do you mean by interesting?
Interesting meaning that when you watching the wire service, it's always starting 1 paragraph and then building up like a pyramid in upside down way. But when you are reading a newspaper article, they are writing in a feature way. That feature is immediately will catch your attention.
That's right.
And now the third niche is that what I'm looking at is how do you link the international news with domestic news?
That's right.
The linkage is sometimes very hard, but the linkage, when you found it, it would be very interesting.
That's right.
And that's the thing that I think you have been in the business before, and this is something we are all looking for.
Another thing that people are thinking about is the so-called Taiwan perspective of international news. In other words, one event can be interpreted in different ways. What's your view about the so-called Taiwan perspective of international events?
Taiwan's perspective is a very hard thing, especially when you have a senior reporter, senior writer for quite a long time. Then you can develop what's your own perspective.
That's right.
Otherwise, we now only report the news as it is. But we have tried to build up some column. The column way of presenting things is try to follow or to coming out a Taiwan perspective on that. But the real perspective sometimes is not coming only from one article. It should be discussed within the opinion page or in other media, that you can have a pool of opinion, and then you can come out with a genuine foreign and a genuine opinion. I think that maybe in the future, perhaps Professor Law can host a show that you can have a panel that you can really talk about a news event that will come out. There's a consensus of opinion. That would be a genuine Taiwan perspective.
For the young people, if they are hoping to get into this kind of business, especially international news, what would be your suggestions for them? You've been in this business for many, many years.
For young people, I think they are more interested in international news. That's a good thing. It's better than in other. I mean, first of all, they will join the journalist trade. It's a good thing. I mean, nowadays pay is getting less. The work is getting harder. But if you want to join the international news business, want to be a foreign correspondent, you have to expose to foreign experience. I think that's important. That when you go out, you stay for 3 months, you stay for a year, and then come back when you look at what's happening in Taiwan. The country you stay in will provide you another perspective when you look at Taiwan.
That's right.
And when you are in Taiwan, you will be getting more familiar with what's happening in that region. So I think, first of all, expose yourself to foreign experience. And try to work. The work is hard, but try to get in the first line of the news. The earthquake now in Sichuan, or the Tibet issue, or other international issue that is going on, will be a very good experience. Don't afraid that it's going to be hard. I mean, nowadays a lot of not even reporters, they are bloggers, but they can write their experience on the blog.
So seasoned journalists, right?
Right, and a lot of times when we pick our reporters, we will first review what kind of blog you have done before, and we find something very good material in there.
That's right. And as you said, that the way we see ourselves could be different from the way other people see Taiwan. So what's the general image that Taiwan has, in the eyes of the foreign media?
This election is draw a lot of attention from the foreign press. First, they are focusing on the change of China policy, and there's less tension across the strait. That's causing the regional and impact. But the second thing is the second change of party, ruling party. I think that's another thing they are focusing on. But for Taiwan, it's a pretty much mature democracy. And for the foreign press, they are not, and probably the next election, there's not going to be that much foreign press anymore, right?
Because democracy has become a way of life in Taiwan.
Right,
it's not interesting anymore. But the thing is, for many foreign media, sometimes they have correspondents based in Taiwan.
Right.
So they are having the ability to catch up in-depth stories. But some foreign media only send people to come here for a week and write stories about it. So there's a missing part of the real juicy politics in Taiwan. How do you see this kind of perception or misperception about Taiwan?
I think due to budget constraint, a lot of times they cover Taiwan is coming from, for instance, Hong Kong Bureau, or even worse, they're coming from Beijing Bureau. That means Taiwan is part of the one China. But I would strongly suggest that Taiwan is very different from China. So when foreign media want to look at Taiwan, maybe Tokyo bureau is a better place. You send people coming over. These kind of things, I think we have to accept because they don't have a lot of budget. But still, they have to throw out their old image about Taiwan or old image about Beijing. Taiwan is very different and very vibrant democracy, and the people you met is very different from people in China. But Taiwan still have the demonstrating effect on what's happening in China. We are a lot of people, foreign journalists, they are telling me that the liberalization happening in China is almost like what's happening in Taiwan 15 years ago.
That's right.
Right.
So I know that your newspaper also sent correspondents to Beijing and Shanghai. How do you see this kind of sort of beginning of liberalization process, especially when it comes to media in mainland China?
I think criticizing Communist Party is one, as long as you don't do it in an organizational way. Right? People can talk more liberally, and especially on policy. If it's not foreign policy, it's not Taiwan policy, people can say more freely about it. Just like the earthquake in Sichuan, I think this time China had really lifted. Probably they were forced to lift it and become more transparent in reporting. I think there's more things happening during Taiwan when there's environmental issue coming out. That's another thing that China's keep close attention to what's happening in Taiwan. Those kind of things, they even say that Taiwan can be a showcase for China.
That's right. In the long run, we are hoping that democracy and freedom media in Taiwan could have demonstration effects on the Chinese mainland. And thank you very much for coming to our program.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for watching Taiwan Outlook, and see you next time.